What up, it's Guido. So I'm playing this physical damage build that I'm kinda experimenting with. And at one point I started to wonder, how much should I invest in bleeding? Is that... because it's, in theory, it sounded really good for my build. And I came to a conclusion that it's not worth really investing a lot into bleed. And let me tell you how I get to this conclusion, because it wasn't easy actually. Because like I mentioned, in theory it's really great. So let me start by explaining briefly about how the build works and what I'm playing. So this is my attack, and the main idea of the build is to deal one-shot attacks with big area of effect, right? So I would scale just damage with investing in attack speed as little as possible, and just one-shot everything on my way. So it's really, I just really find it really fun. And the main idea of this build, or the main gem of the build, is actually Feast of War, because it gives ancestrally boosted attack every around 1.8 seconds, right? So that's my attack speed. I was like, yeah, I'm gonna just attack 1.8 seconds, because what's the point of attacking faster, because this is so much more damage than if I attack. Earthquake was a good gem to use with that, because there's this aftershock after 1 second, and don't have to do... I'm not gonna attack faster than every 1 second anyway. So there's no really downside of using Feast of War with Earthquake. Well, there is a little bit, but that's getting into details. Other gems are mostly gems like Brutality or melee physical damage to boost just the damage. And then also I'm using Pulverize, because Pulverize what gives increased area of effect, which helps me with clear speed, because if I one-shot everything, I want to one-shot as big area as possible, right? And on top of that, what really enables this build are War Cries, right? So in the current setup, or my current attack speed of every 1.8 seconds, it's 1.76 because the gem level is 21. 1.8 seconds is that I can always have both of my War Cries on. Like I slam, right? I still have one slam. I War Cry with this one. I slam with this one, right? War Cry, slam with this one. So it's always on. So both War Cries on. So what does that do? This intimidating cry doubles my damage. Right, so I always deal double damage basically. And the Seismic Cry deals 30% more damage and 20% of every attack. So it's like 50% more damage. And it's on every time, because I attack so slowly. These exerted attacks are always on. And I am just doing a lot of damage. It's really fun. So going back to the bleeding, initially when I googled bleeding, it's what I found out is that 70% of your damage that you hit is going to be dealt as damage per second, and that sounded really great. You know, I'm attacking very slowly, I'm doing a lot of damage, and I can deal 70% of that per second. That sounds insanely good. It's like doubling my probably doubling my damage, but it didn't work out that way. When I started to check point of building, right, I started investigating. It's like, what is this? Like, my average damage was like 1 million something, and the bleed was just like 1/5 of that, right? That doesn't go together with my wiki. So what was the reason for that? And the most important part of this is this section right here. Other modifiers of increased, reduced, more or less type effect in hits, like attack, melee, range, projectile, and so on, as well as any damage modifiers specific to skill, do not apply to bleed. So this was first of my downfalls. Right? There was another one, very specific one that I didn't know about. So this was one of the first downfalls. So if you want to scale, so what I realized that if I want to scale bleeding, so I need to use all of my gems, or all of my gems that I use need to have something like supported skills deal 40% more damage with bleeding. Like, it has to be specified. Or let's see, Feast of War. Ancestral boosted slams deal 102 more damage with ailments, right? So that's the part that scales the bleeding. And you can see the first reason why the damage is not so high here, because slams with hits do 150 more damage, like it says on the gem, but ailments do only 102% more damage. So here already I'm losing 50% damage just because of this gem that I'm using, right? So that's first reason why maybe it's not that good. If I take a look at Pulverize, for example, this is especially bad because supported skills deal 59% more area damage, right? If I take a look here, it's not said, but area damage is not damage over time, it's not damage of ailments, so this gem doesn't give any damage to my bleeding. So those two already combined, I lose a lot of damage. So my theory of making big slams and dealing a lot of damage and 70% of that going to bleed doesn't work that way already, because these two gems don't support bleeding, really. And these are kind of the centerpieces, because these add the most area of effect and most damage for my, so I can't really combine those, right? That's the first thing. If I take a look at something else like Brutality support, this one says supported skills deal 59% more physical damage, and this scales the bleeding because physical damage scales bleeding. Or if I take a look at what I mentioned before, melee physical damage, that also scales the bleeding. So there was some upside, but I would have to switch around my gems, and that would totally brick my build or make it totally different. So this was actually the first downfall, which already makes bleeding like, ooh, damn, that's a lot less damage than I wanted, right? Another mechanic that also for some reason wasn't intuitive, to say the least, is damage from the war cries. As you see, Seismic Cry, right? It says exerted attacks deal 20% more damage, right? And this, fortunately, it works with bleeding, right? You can get higher damage bleeds with Seismic Cry. And here's comes the confusing part. This intimidating cry doesn't work with bleeding. It says exerted attacks deal double damage, but it doesn't work with bleeding. And it doesn't work with bleeding because double damage mechanic is not working with bleeding. And that's kind of it. I found this Reddit post about GGG, right? And Mark said that the chance to deal double damage is a hit only mechanic, right? So I was like, what? How? So it doesn't work. Anything that says chance to deal double damage apparently doesn't work with elements or bleeding. So that was my second downfall, and it turns all of my, in theory, great 700. It's like if I take 70% of my 1 million, right? If I take that would 700,000 damage per second into a tiny, not tiny, but considerably less, 200,000 damage here, bleeding per second, right? So you have to be very careful what you pick. It always has to specify something with elements, damage over time, right? And these are all like this: damage, physical damage, damage over time, bleeding damage. It has to specify specifically this. So the 70% that I was hoping for totally didn't work out for me. We'll have to find some different ways. Okay, I hope that was useful. Thank you for watching. Subscribe, and have a great day. Great stay. Great. That was great ending.